The Texas sun beat down mercilessly as I stood on the edge of what my mother-in-law, Patricia Richardson, had just called 300 acres of worthless dirt. My grandfather's land stretched out before me, a sea of scrub brush and mesquite trees that had been in my family for 3 generations. To most people, it might have looked worthless, but I knew better. Really, Rachel, Patricia sighed, her designer heels sinking slightly into the dusty ground. You should be thanking me for taking this burden off your hands. Property taxes alone would eat up half your teacher's salary. I watched her gesture dismissively at the land, her diamond rings catching the sunlight. Behind her, my husband Thomas shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. He'd always been unable to stand up to his mother, even now, when she was orchestrating the theft of my inheritance. $50,000 is more than generous, she continued, pulling out the contract she had her lawyers draw up. Especially for land that hasn't produced anything but rattlesnakes since before you were born. I thought about the certified letter sitting in my desk drawer at home. The one from Lone Star Energy that had arrived 3 days ago. The one I hadn't shown anyone yet. The one that would make Patricia's carefully planned scheme blow up in her face. You're right, I said quietly, watching confusion flicker across her perfectly made-up face. She'd expected resistance, had prepared for a fight. My easy acquiescence made her suspicious. Well, good, she recovered quickly. I always said you had more sense than sentiment. Unlike your grandfather, bless his heart, holding onto this wasteland like it was gold. My grandfather, James Cooper, had been a high school science teacher like me. But he'd also been something else, a geology enthusiast with a keen understanding of Texas' hidden resources. He'd passed that knowledge on to me during countless weekends spent on this land, teaching me to read the signs that most people missed. You'll sign the papers at dinner tonight, Patricia announced, already turning back toward her luxury SUV. I'll have the funds transferred immediately. Of course, I agreed, suppressing a smile as I watched her stilettos wobble on the uneven ground. Wouldn't want to delay your plans. Those plans I knew included selling the land to a real estate developer who'd been eyeing it for a new subdivision. Patricia had been bragging about it at every family gathering for months, how she'd turned this wasteland into a profitable development. She thought she was taking advantage of my financial situation. A teacher's salary, student loans, and a husband whose business was struggling. What she didn't know was that I'd been in contact with 3 different energy companies over the past year. Grandfather's geology lessons hadn't been just weekend entertainment, they'd been preparation. He'd known what lay beneath this worthless land, had documented it meticulously in journals I'd inherited along with the property. That evening, at Patricia's carefully orchestrated dinner party, I sat quietly as she presided over her dining room table like a queen. The crystal glasses sparkled, the silver gleamed, and the contract sat by my plate like a snake waiting to strike. I've already spoken with the developers, she announced to the assembled family members. This time next year, Richardson Estates will be the most exclusive address in the county. My brother-in-law James whistled. Must be worth a fortune if developers are interested. All the land itself is worthless. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. But location is everything. Once we clear all that scrub brush and level it properly. I took a sip of wine, thinking about the geological surveys grandfather had commissioned years ago, updated by my own recent tests. About the specific mineral rights he carefully maintained when selling small parcels of the original property. About the look that would appear on Patricia's face when she realized what she'd done. Rachel dear, Patricia's voice cut through my thoughts. Let's get the unpleasant business out of the way, shall we? Then we can enjoy our dinner. She slid the contract across the table, a pen following it like a well-choreographed dance. I could feel Thomas tense beside me, could see the mixture of guilt and relief on his face. He thought his mother was helping us, giving us a way out of our financial struggles. I picked up the pen, noting how the dining room had fallen silent. Patricia's smile was triumphant as I began to sign, her fingers already reaching for the contract. Just one question, I said, pausing with the pen hovering over the signature line. The mineral rights are included in this transfer, correct? Patricia's smile flickered slightly. Of course, dear. The entire property, lock, stock, and barrel, as they say. Though why you're worried about mineral rights on worthless land? I signed with a flourish, sliding the contract back to her. Just curious. Grandfather always said it was important to be clear about these things. Patricia practically snatched the contract, her eagerness showing through her polished veneer. Well, that's done. Thomas, be a dear and open the champagne. We should celebrate. As Thomas moved to the sidebar, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text. Papers signed. Proceed with phase 2. The response came immediately. Understood. Survey team arriving 8 a.m. tomorrow. I raised my champagne glass along with everyone else, smiling as Patricia toasted to new beginnings and profitable ventures. She had no idea that I just orchestrated the most expensive lesson she ever learned about underestimating people. By this time tomorrow, Patricia would discover that my worthless inheritance was sitting on top of one of the largest untapped oil deposits in the county. And thanks to her own greed and hasty legal work, she'd just signed away millions in potential profits. Grandfather had always said that patience was the key to both geology and justice. As I watched Patricia celebrate her supposed victory, I thought about how right he'd been. Some things, like oil deposits and revenge, just needed time to develop properly. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for what was about to unfold. I sat in my grandfather's old pickup truck at the edge of the property, watching through binoculars as the Lone Star Energy survey team set up their equipment. Right on schedule, a cloud of dust announced Patricia's arrival. Her Mercedes SUV roaring down the dirt road like an angry bull. I checked my watch, 8:15 a.m. She must have gotten an early call from someone at the county record's office about the sudden interest in her new property. Patricia's car skidded to a stop, spraying gravel. She emerged looking considerably less polished than yesterday, her designer outfit already wilting in the Texas heat. Her face turned an interesting shade of red when she spotted the Lone Star Energy logo on the trucks. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, storming toward the survey team. "This is private property." Mark Wilson, Lone Star's head geologist, approached her with a professional smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Richardson. We're here to complete the final surveys for the extraction permits. Everything's been properly filed with the county." "Extraction permits?" Patricia's voice rose an octave. "What extraction permits?" I chose that moment to step out of the truck, enjoying how Patricia's eyes widened when she saw me. "Morning, Patricia. Beautiful day for a survey, isn't it?" "Rachel?" She spun toward me, her perfect coiffure coming undone in the morning breeze. "What are you doing here?" "This is my land now." "The land, yes," I agreed calmly, "but not what's under it." Mark pulled out a tablet, displaying a complex geological survey map. "Mrs. Richardson, our preliminary tests indicate a significant oil deposit approximately 2,000 feet below the surface. Conservative estimates suggest oil." Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. "Roughly 5 million barrels," I finished for him. "Worth about $400 million at current prices. Of course, that's before extraction costs and royalties." Patricia's face went from red to white so fast I worried she might faint. But the contract didn't include mineral rights." I completed her thought. "You might want to check paragraph 7, subsection C. Your lawyers were very thorough about transferring the surface property, but they never mentioned subsurface rights. Those still belong to me." "That's impossible." She fumbled in her designer bag, pulling out a crumpled copy of the contract. "Actually," Mark interjected, "it's quite common in Texas law. Mineral rights are separate from surface property rights. The documentation Ms. Cooper filed with the county last month makes it very clear." "Last month?" Patricia's head snapped up. "You knew? You knew about this when you signed the contract." I walked over to one of the survey vehicles, running my hand along its dusty surface. "Grandfather taught me more than just science, Patricia. He taught me to recognize when people underestimate you, to see the value in things others call worthless." "Thomas will never allow this," she sputtered. "This is his family's legacy too." Actually, a new voice joined the conversation. We turned to see Thomas walking up from his own car, looking both sheepish and determined. "I knew about it too. Rachel told me everything last night after dinner." The memory of our conversation flooded back. "She's your mother, Thomas," I'd said, showing him the geological surveys and the Lone Star Energy offer. "I wanted you to have a chance to warn her." He'd stared at the papers for a long time before responding. "All these years she's treated you like you weren't good enough for her son. Like being a teacher made you beneath us. Maybe it's time she learned about real value." Now, watching Thomas stand up to his mother for the first time in our marriage, I felt a surge of pride. "This is a trick, Patricia declared, but her voice trembled. I'll sue. You'll what? I asked quietly. Admit in court that you tried to swindle your daughter-in-law out of her inheritance, that you pressured her to sell valuable land for a fraction of its worth? That might make an interesting story for the country club gossips. The survey team continued their work, the steady beeping of their equipment providing background music to Patricia's meltdown. The developers, she began, have already been informed that the property is no longer available. Thomas cut in. I called them this morning. Mark cleared his throat politely. Miss Cooper, if you're ready, we should discuss the extraction timeline. Lone Star Energy is prepared to offer a very competitive royalty package, 20% above standard rates. I nodded. Plus a seat on the local advisory board. Grandfather always said education and energy were Texas' two greatest resources. I plan to honor both. Patricia swayed slightly, and Thomas moved to steady her. Mother, maybe you should sit down. How much? She whispered. The initial offer is $20 million for the first phase, I said. With ongoing royalties expected to generate about $2 million annually for at least the next decade. She collapsed into the passenger seat of her Mercedes, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The property taxes on this worthless land will be quite manageable now, I added, unable to resist one final dig. Over the next few hours, as the survey team completed their work, I watched Patricia age years. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the shock and fury warring on her face as she realized how completely she'd been outmaneuvered. By evening, the story had spread through the family like wildfire. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives who'd witnessed my humiliation at dinner the night before. The family dynamics had shifted seismically, much like the oil deposits beneath our feet. 1 week later, I sat in a Lone Star Energy boardroom signing the final contracts. The company's lawyers had been impressed by my grandfather's meticulous record-keeping and my own careful planning. One last thing, I told them, pulling out a document of my own. I want to establish a scholarship fund with part of the proceeds for local students interested in studying geology or education. In memory of your grandfather? The CEO asked. No, I smiled. In honor of Patricia Richardson, to remind everyone that true value isn't always visible on the surface. The story became something of a legend in our part of Texas. They say Patricia sold her house and moved to Florida, unable to bear watching oil rigs rise on land she called worthless. Thomas and I stayed, watching as my grandfather's legacy helped fund new schools and community projects. The worthless land proved even richer than initial estimates suggested. Within 2 years, the extraction operation had expanded, and my royalty checks had doubled. I kept teaching them now in a new science building that bore my grandfather's name. Sometimes, when I visit the property, I bring my students for geology lessons. Standing where my grandfather once stood, I teach them what he taught me, that knowledge, patience, and integrity are the real valuable resources. And on my desk at school, I keep the contract Patricia had me sign, framed next to my grandfather's first geological survey of the property. A reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about proving just how wrong someone was to underestimate you.